He is a writer, an editor, a filmmaker, a journalist, a professor. He's been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. He's the author of one of my favorite Substacks, if not my favorite Substack, America. And he was one of our guests at the first ever 5/8 live event in New York City. Steven Beschloss.
Steven Beschloss!
Hello.
We're so happy to see you.
And you.
Yeah, a lot has happened since we were together.
Oh, really? I was just listening to a little bit off camera. I'm already exhausted, by the destruction of our world.
Yeah.
It's bad. Now but
can I say
yes,
this week, with all the terrible things, including the continuation of of a man who'd been illegally kidnapped to a foreign gulag and who's still there. We at least saw a U.S. senator sort of stand up and sort of refuse to just treat that as given and go there and make it possible to at least have a conversation with him. That's a good thing. You talked, Stephanie, about Harvard University, and you talked about it in a meaningful context of thought police and what it is that the Trump regime is looking to do. But can I say, for me, it's one of those really hopeful things that happened, right? The act of defiance, the refusal to capitulate, the refusal to surrender. And you know what? It's finally, I read all the things that Alan Garber, the president, said about the upholding of free speech and the values of an institution to produce knowledge and to have sort of a free exchange of ideas and all of that. But I thought to myself, they have $52 billion in their endowment, and they're well positioned to say, fuck you, Donald Trump.
That's right. And thank God they did, right?
Yeah.
Colombia was positioned to do it as well, and they capitulated, and now they're trying to undo all of that. But thank God they did. I'm with you on that. Let them shine the way.
And they did. They did. Actually, they did. It was really interesting. Maybe people saw this, maybe they missed it, but within 12 hours, Claire Shipman, who's the acting president of Colombia, which capitulated and which, worried about the $400 million that they were going to lose in sort of grants and contracts, and thought that, you can deal with a terrorist, who thought that you could, deal with the ravenous beast who's never satisfied, and that somehow they would sort of be able to survive as they were. But Claire Shipman put out a statement that basically said, we are not going to be, her words, sort of heavily orchestrated, and we are not going to allow ourselves to relinquish our independence and autonomy. Well, it was a little late, but the point is that she was obviously inspired.
Yes.
I read, somebody wrote an op-ed in one of the paper, I can't remember now who wrote it or which paper it was in, and the lead was, Harvard is 150 years older than the United States, and it has a higher endowment, is larger than 100 countries' GDPs. Yeah. So, and it was making
and
the argument,
they've raised money since this.
Yeah,
a lot.
The argument was made that if they had not done this, it would be over.
Yeah,
like it's so important, because I was thinking, it's not just that it's a university. Think of all the people that have graduated from Harvard and where they are and all the industries they're in and all the shit that they're doing. And I don't know if you know this, Harvard is actually a school where smart people go, so it's not like there's a bunch of dummies that are launched into, Jared Kushner accepted, into the world here. So I'm sorry, Steven, go ahead. You were going to say something.
No, so I look at that, that refusal to capitulate, that refusal to surrender, that act of defiance. I'm in this period, since we talked now some months ago, it surely, like you all, I'm documenting the transgressions, right? The desecrations and the accelerated pace of all of this. And there are days, there are days when it's hard to imagine, how we get through this, and to feel overwhelmed, and to think that we're just 3 months into this, and like, I mean, how do we even get to midterms, let alone through 4 years? And it's easy to get sort of wrapped up in all of that, and I have my dark days like everyone else, but those kind of moments of defiance are so critical in this period, to convince people that their victory, the victory of the sociopaths, is not a given, that we have the capacity to move this. And so the money and the power of Harvard could fight back. And we've already seen, Trump has responded by saying they're going to take away their tax
exempt.
status.
That's not going to work.
As if
Spoiler
that's
alert.
the political entity that really needs to have
Yeah.
its tax exempts taken away. And then the latest thing is that, they now want all of Harvard's records over the last, roughly over the last decade, in terms of foreign donations, and, the activities of foreign scholars and foreign researchers and students, whatever way that they can try to sort of break it. But it tells you how they're failing, how they've rather than like, oh my God, they're still going after them. It's like, oh my God, they're realizing they're losing. Which is why they're sort of looking for anything. And, I mean, there have been other sort of events like that. I'm thinking about, sort of in the same vein, in the last days, the Big Ten conference with 18 universities made the decision to resolve to create an academic pact, an academic alliance, very much like NATO, where they basically said an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us. Right?
It's so great. I think there's some law firms also that stood up to him, that he tried to take down. So we saw that recently. And with the law firms, again, continuing to remember, this is a crime family, this is a criminal, putting it in that context, it would help those law firms, because he's not going to stop draining them. He's going to make demand upon demand upon demand. And they're learning this. They're like, wait a minute, we're not doing pro bono. We thought we were already doing this work, so maybe we just extend it. But, he's never going to pay a bill.
Yeah.
And he doesn't want his administration no one's ever going to pay for this. So imagine, and it's the president. So he's going to say, give me your best guys. I want the partners on this. He's not going to settle for just junior lawyers working pro bono. No. So when are they going to have time to take care of any other clients? It's going to start being that he's going to, as you said, this is vampiric. You let that vampire in and try and think you really think you can do a blood pact with a vampire?
There's no such thing. There's no agreement that is concluded. Right? Any effort that's made to appease only feeds his hunger to take more.
And, and we'll even get into that in another segment that, hopefully you'll stick around with, of like, it's this sort of, anything that's a grievance, right, is also, we're really dealing with somebody who's, if there's any narcissistic injury, he's going to keep going and going and going like nothing. And that's what that thought police felt like to me. It's like, oh my God, they're going to just keep coming from. It's not enough to just come for our bodies and try to control our bodies, either controlling women's bodies or rounding up men and throwing them in prisons and, whatever. It's like they want to, it's still not enough. It's like, no, you're part of this thing that we need to eradicate. And so we got to come in and eradicate it in your thoughts. And change your thoughts. If we're going to be forced to coexist with you, we have to have control over your thoughts, over your essence.
And I don't doubt, and it's not
psychopathic desire is my point. Their desire is like, there's no satiating it.
Yeah, and look, it's not just Trump. You know, I mean,
Right.
this is the problem. I mean, it would help us if we could imagine if you remove that cancer, that the world becomes a better place. But you know, we're living in this moment. You know, whether it's you know, little Marco, or whether it's all the other, you know, miscreants and sociopaths that are surrounding Trump, the other criminals who are sort of doing their part in this,
Yeah.
you know, recklessly dismantling. You know, that's all true. But you know, I will not get over the fact that you have, you know, every member of the United States Senate who's a Republican, every member essentially of the House who's a Republican has gone along with this. You know, every one of them spoke those words of the oath of office that they took as their responsibility to preserve and defend the Constitution of the United States. And every one of them has broken that most fundamental, you know, that sort of sacred duty that they have to their country, because they know that, you know, the lawlessness is on a daily basis. They know that it's happening.
Yeah.
It's
We
You
had
know?
it's such
McCloskey say that.
disgusting cowardice. I mean, if you're not willing to stand up, get another job, you
Yeah.
know? And as for the law firms, it's interesting talking about it like that Trump will use their resources, just they're going to just work for him for free.
Yeah.
They could also work against him for free. Like they litigate. They're fucking law firms. That's
Yeah.
what they do. Like if they come after somebody else has to hire a law firm and have lawyers to go. The law firm has lawyers. They don't need to hire lawyers because they already employ lawyers, right? So
Right, but he's taking those big
right. No,
firms.
I know, I
He's taking
know.
them off the. It's a divorce tactic too.
It's
Like
so
this
stupid.
guy knows how to hire up all the attorneys in New York, so your ex doesn't get them, and so that when you get into this divorce, you know everybody has to say, "I'm sorry, I have a conflict. I can't represent you." So
But you have the New York
that.
Times, I mean, in the last day, sort of referring to the fact, you know, there's a, you know, the nine law firms, major law firms that capitulated to Trump, that collectively had promised about nearly $1 billion to serve him, right? The pro bono work, and the article is making the point that these firms are now surprised that they may be called to duty to things that are like other than veterans' rights, and you know, other than the things that they imagine, that now
No
there's talk
way.
that
Not
they might get,
possible.
exactly, that they might get pulled into, you know, duty to try to negotiate some of these tariff deals with our, you know, former allies, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah,
So you know that they've
not very smart
discovered
lawyers.
that the world in which they thought they were promising to serve has somehow gotten expanded beyond their original expectation.
I mean,
Yeah,
if
One
only
that's
there
side.
were signs.
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
If only there was history, as Greg always says. If only there
And
was
how
something to
many
look
of
at.
those billionaires, can I ask that, you know, of the tech
Yeah,
bros and others who were appallingly standing behind Trump, you know, on the stage on the
yeah.
day of the inauguration?
Oh, that photo you
Uh,
ran was
how
really
many of
something. Oh,
those people now, you know, have already begun to grasp, you know, with these tariff policies, how much their world is being, their fortunes, you know, their company's well-being, you know, all of that has been, you know, decimated and will only grow worse in the coming months. And you know, they were a part of what convinced Trump that he could do anything.
it's gross. Now I was thinking about Stephen when we saw you in New York, and I remember one thing that you said, because we were all, this is like 5 days after the election, and
Yeah.
everyone was just sort of staggering around dazed. And you said, uh, you know who's starting to stand up is Jerome Powell. And you said something like, you know, Jerome Powell, resistance leader. I wouldn't have foreseen it, but great. Welcome to the
Welcome
fight
to
or
the
whatever. And
resistance.
and
Jerome
and
Yeah.
I
Powell.
thought about it because this week again, here's Jerome Powell and Trump's going after him,
Man of the people.
and he can't do anything. He can't, right? I don't think he's allowed to fire him, and he ain't going anywhere.
Well,
So
no, he's trying to redo. He's challenging the law that came into place specifically to protect from the robber barons and all this stuff. That you actually had independent agencies around the money right, in our economy, and so he's challenging that. That's going up to the Supreme Court, and it's whether the Roberts Court will support in reversing. I can't remember the name of the statute of the law. So reversing it or not,
the
the
autonomy of
ruling.
the Fed. That's all the Rand Paul people are going to be so delighted if the Fed blows up.
I guess I just want to say I was looking up that of like, back onto the tech people real quick, Stephen. So I did take a look at Palantir, right?
Mm-hmm.
Peter Thiel's company, and part of it was because the images coming out of that El Salvadoran prison reminded me of the Uyghurs so much. I'm like, oh God, this El Salvadorans have to have the men in white, whereas the Uyghurs were in blue, but it's the same formation. It's the same kind of prison system. It's the same oppression. It's, and I'm wondering if that's run by Palantir as well. But I looked at his stock performance, and while everybody else's stock crashed, and his did too on April 4th when the announcement of the tariffs and all this, his is one of the few tech stocks that not only fully recovered, but is higher than it was before the announcement of the tariffs. So I think there might be some folks that are making out like bandits with all of this.
You mean the ones that he gave advance notice to?
Yeah.
That were in the
Well,
Oval
they're
Office?
giving advance notice, but even some of them, like Apple hasn't fully recovered, and Apple got a carve out, right? Okay, we're going to carve out Apple. We'll carve that out. Tim Cook everybody seems perfectly happy and fine with that at Apple. Oh, great. Okay, tariffs don't affect us like they affect everybody else. Fine. People still pay $1,000 for our phones. Great. But Palantir did. It did.
I don't doubt that there are some of those who are going to benefit in this period. Musk at the top of the list. But again, you have to take. Again, I'm always trying to see if there's those sort of signs that all of this sort of downward spiral is not inevitable, is not the sort of the end of the story. And it strikes me that suddenly now apparently it's a more serious terrorist attack to spray paint in a Tesla showroom than it is to beat up a policeman or hit them with a flagpole at the U.S. Capitol. One is patriotic and the other one is apparently a terrorist act that could be charged with 20 years of imprisonment. Yeah. And the point is that it's working, right? That the public that has decided to to recognize that the Tesla cars are swastika cars and to sort of treat this whole sort of Tesla regime as part of the problem, and in so doing, it's created, I think, sort of the stock price is down, the sales are down, the position of its owner is down, all of that.
We don't see him so much
an impact
anymore. Yeah, it's having an impact. He's kind of getting a loser L on his forehead too after he couldn't get the Wisconsin thing done. So.
Just like Inglourious Bastards. Let's just hope it stays there permanently.
Let's just hope it stays there.
Can I read a quote?
Yes,
I have two quotes that I wanted to share. One of them is, and maybe many people have already heard it, but it always I think is sort of worth repeating. This is from I think one of the heroes of this period, which is J.B. Pritzker, who's been very vivid. And, he was at a human rights campaign dinner in Los Angeles about a month ago. And he was there to talk about specifically sort of the dangers that the LGBTQ plus sort of community is facing, and his state and he were committed to providing the support of whatever they could. But he had something to say which was true in that particular instance, and I think meaningful more widely, which is this: bending to the whims of a bully will not end his cruelty. It will only embolden him. The response to authoritarianism isn't acquiescence. Bullies respond to one thing and one thing only: a punch in the face.
That's it. He's right.
That's it.
He's right.
Yeah.
He's paraphrasing
I don't
Woody
know
Allen
whether
one.
you all are like advocating for people to go out and start punching
No,
people in the face, but
no,
let's
but
speak at least proverbially.
yeah, there's a saying in Russia. We had a guest once that was like explaining how to handle Putin before he invaded Ukraine. This is a few years back, and so I can't remember the phrase, but it translates into fist under the nose. So it's
Yeah.
like you have to keep your fist under these people's noses. That's the only thing they respond to, and it's the only thing they respect. If you don't do that, you're a mark.
Yeah.
Right? You become the mark, and you're gonna get walked all over. You cannot give them what they want. You have to come back and say no. And if you try it, I'm gonna punch you.
Yeah.
So it's that
Harvard did it.
same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Harvard did it.
Harvard did it.
Yeah, I think we start to see some judges, and I think we're going to see more judges that are going to do it as well.
I hope
And
so.
and I think I assume you all have talked at some point about the Erica Chenoweth research, the Harvard researcher who makes the point that if you really want to create political change, and she studied many countries historically and recently, and looked at what were the conditions that made civil disobedience and public protest matter, to be able to identify redress and goals, and in some cases change governments, and at least demand and achieve changes. Her thing is you have to have 3.5% of the population as a
Yes.
baseline, and in the American context, that's 12 million people.
12 million people, and if those people show up and are heard routinely, you also can't back off. You have to keep showing up and keep showing up and keep showing up. That you can change a regime.
Yeah.
That's what's required for regime change.
Yeah, and I think once we get to those kind of numbers, I think they actually will only grow. I mean, we are the majority
Yeah, I know.
after all, and
No.
not only those, that tiny percentage of Trump supporters who fucked around and are finding out.
Yeah.
Not only the many tens of millions of people who chose not to fuck around, who just chose not to show up,
Yeah.
and now are discovering what did they do.
Yeah.
Or are not discovering, or still don't know. We were talking about this before. So many people don't know. Wait, did you have another quote though? You were saying you had
I do have one more.
Yeah,
Thank you. I'm still in this sort of realm of the defiance. And again, I don't usually quote a Reagan appointed judge.
Oh boy.
Who was appointed in 1984 and is a conservative judge by history and background, as sort of a part of the opposition per se. I mean, he's somebody who actually is part of the opposition because he believes in due process and he believes in the rule of law, kind of simple, fundamental things like that. And this was today, Harvey Wilkinson as a judge, Harvey Wilkinson, who was the one who was circuit court judge, who was asked to, consider the decision of the district judge to demand that the government begins to make clear, to provide evidence about their efforts to facilitate the opportunity for Kilmar Abrego Garcia to be returned to the United States so that he actually can receive justice, can receive due process, and so forth. But I'm going to read the quote because it's sort of so fundamental, and it's speaking directly to the sort of essentially the criticism of this administration. The government is asserting a right to stash away residents of this country in foreign prisons without the semblance of due process that is the foundation of our constitutional order. Further, it claims in essence that because it has rid itself of custody, that there is nothing that can be done. This should be shocking, not only to judges, but to the intuitive sense of liberty that Americans far removed from courthouses still hold dear.
Oh, that's good.
That's good.
That's very good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very good.
Harvey Wilkinson, a member of the opposition.
Yeah, it's not out of mind. Don't let it be out of mind.
Yeah.
Because that's the point of the out of sight. I like that a lot. Okay, those are good quotes.
Right, here's another quote. I mean, this is
Yeah.
from Annie Hall. I know we're not supposed to
Okay,
talk.
Annie Hall quote.
I know we're not supposed to talk about Woody, but there's a thing where they're arguing about Nazis assembling and what to do about them. And a man says, well, there was this devastating satirical piece on that in the op-ed page of the Times. It is devastating. And Woody says, well, a satirical piece in the Times is one thing, but bricks and baseball bats really gets right to the point. And a woman says, oh, but really biting satire is always better than physical force. And Isaac says, no, physical force is always better with Nazis. It's hard to satirize a guy with shiny boots. That's it. And Woody, he's like, pack of the bat. Yeah. So, to your point, like there's metaphorically, they react and respond to force and power and dominance. Yeah. And I think as soon as they see it, they immediately cower because they're all cowards at the end of the day.
They're cowards. Yeah.
Every Nazi is a bootlicker.
You can't shake us down.
Yeah.
Sorry. Harvard's like, yeah, sorry, you can't shake us down. And we've got fuck you money. So let's roll. And we've got great lawyers too. Guess what?
Yeah. And
they hired the lawyers they hired. Steven, you know who they hired, right? You know? Harvard hired two like MAGA hard-ass lawyers. So one of them is her. I forget. He was one of the people that did something bad in the first administration. So these are people that really know that side and what makes them tick and all this stuff. So not only are they working for Harvard and have all this inside information, they're also not working for Trump. So they've poached two people that would ordinarily be working for the other side. This is what, like, I mean, with the, to your point, Stephen, about about this being inspirational and possibly a domino that will, have
a turning point. I hope it's, let's make it a turning point.
Yeah.
Yes.
As much as I don't want Harvard to be a turning point in anything, it would be fun to.
Look, these are times, strange bedfellows, right? I mean, we'll take the, we'll take the friends and the, the supporters of resistance wherever they come from.
I'll take the courage. I'll just take the courage. It's like, we're at a point where it's like, you're showing courage, and that's what we're going to stand behind. We're going to stand behind the courage. Everything else is, wait in line.
Yeah. And look, one of the things that's so, disappointing to me, and I think for many of us sort of in these last months, is how many Democrats, maybe even pro-democracy advocates, let's say, who have failed to understand how profoundly not normal this moment is, and who have still imagined that the usual rules of order somehow are operative.
You mean I'm sorry, go ahead. And half.
Well, no, and look, I mean, there's obviously a lot of research on normalcy bias that sort of makes the the point that the people's inability to recognize the significance of the threat, to fail to sort of see impending disaster because they refuse to believe that it's possible. And so they treat it as if the usual ways of doing things are somehow going to be the way change.
I'm going to fix it all. Yeah, it's again those two states that lawyer wrote about all those decades ago of the normative state. If you're just staring at the normative state and thinking, okay, we know this prerogative state is going on, this lawlessness is going on over here, but we're just going to pay attention to this thing over here. And we'll just speak and operate only from in here. What happens is that starts to shrink because this is growing. The shadows are growing. They're growing and growing. They're sucking out, right? And that capitalism itself is necessary to keep in place for all of this to happen. So people are still in the same system, the same capitalistic system. And as long as that's working for them, they don't, they think everything's okay, but this pejorative world or the prerogative world is fueled by the capitalism much more so than anything else. So that was the other part of that article. When
Steven,
you were saying, oh, I'm sorry, Greg, but I was just gonna say, when you were saying that people who are doing that in the Democratic Party, I'm sorry, but Chuck Schumer is on the top of my list. He's on the top of my list, which takes us into, we're going to talk about New York in a little bit. I hope you stick around for that. But
quick question, just because it occurred to me while you guys were talking, like the idea that it's all normal. because there is a Gen Z didn't turn out for the election in the numbers, and there's clearly a lot of young men who think MAGA is cool and Elon is smart and all that stuff. I mean, do you think that on some level, because anybody now who's 18, 20 years old has now basically been living with some Trump weirdness for most of the time that they've been cognizant of politics? I mean, do you think that how do you think that affects people who are young? I don't know. It's just throwing it out there as something to think about.
Oh boy. Well, I mean, it's awful to think that there are young people who look at this and think this represents the body politic, right? That this utter hostility toward government and this utter, exploitation of people's weakness, right, for the commission of tyranny, for a despot to come in and feed himself on the ruins of public liberty, as sort of George Washington said in his sort of farewell address. I mean, we've known about the potential of this for a very long time throughout our history, but the thought of young people who think that this is it. I mean, if you lived in the 1980s and you heard the oft repeated notion from Ronald Reagan that the 9 worst words in the English language is I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. Right.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so but it was treated almost as a joke rather than serious in terms of obviously he did a lot of dismantling that he did in those days, and I think we're still dealing with the echoes of that. But the fundamental hostility toward government and the use of government to punish and to ruin people's lives, rather than government there to try to make lives better and to try to improve the everyday life of Americans. That switch is so ugly. And it, and I think that the ethos of that, the impact of that, has the risk of having a whole population of young people, doubting, it's not only just like the loss of trust, like doubting what role government really does play in the world, to improve lives. I mean, and that's a terrible danger. If I can say, I mean, I have, friends who, grew up in Eastern Europe, and I'm thinking of one, who's in Poland, and who at some point had to do a legal kind of a deal, and and she said, I'm not going to involve the government. I'm not going to involve sort of lawyers to try to punish the person that I have in mind here, because I can't stand the idea of the government being used to harm people.
Yeah.
And so I mean, it sort of, I hadn't really thought about the idea that there's this whole population where the world they know is like the last decade of political life.
I mean, I try to tell my son, I'm like,
road to repair.
My son thinks I'm insane for doing all of this stuff, and I'm like, you have to understand, this is not normal.
This is not normal.
When you're my age, you'll look back and be like, oh, okay, I get it now.
Yeah.
But it's
no,
not
and
normal.
even my father's almost 80, reflecting on his granddaughter and grandsons, of just feeling so terrible for them that this is really has become the norm.
Yeah.
Because as my mom also says, and my parents are very wise, my mom is like, he never went away. It's not like we had a Biden presidency without this man's. He was running a shadow government the whole time, and he was reported on and talked about constantly, as if he was still the president or had some official role in government leadership while he was a regular citizen. So it's been like 3 Trump terms. It's just one of them. He was in the the underworld, back
like
in
he was effectively an incumbent without being an incumbent.
He was.
Okay,
He was
we have to now. Steven has to leave at
in a few minutes,
9:15. So we have to set the clock right now, and I think
I'm
we can
setting
get
it right now.
just
Oh my
under
God!
the wire. Just
under
the wire.
The pressure.
We have to. So
all right, the clock is on, Steven. We wanted to talk about New York.
Yeah.
So banging off of that thing with Chuck Schumer, it does feel like we're all New Yorkers, just to full disclosure for everybody. It just does feel like our state is now in the crosshairs. And I think it's always been for him, it's always been this idea that he could never be the king of New York. It didn't matter how many Home Alone movies he allowed to be filmed in his hotels where he could have a role where he walks on and everyone goes, oh my God, Mr. Trump, I'm in New York, so I must see Trump because he is New York, or his stupid, crappy TV show, whatever.
Page 6.
Yeah. New York really, truly
John
never.
Barron reporting.
John Barron. New York never really, truly embraced him or took him seriously. And as has been reported on quite a lot, and from people who knew him, that was like a narcissistic injury he couldn't get over. But New York also has the teeth to come after this guy, and has been recently and successfully, Letitia James. And I just feel like it's like, I feel like he's coming for New York. I do. I really do.
On Twitter or X or whatever the fuck it's called, whatever letter of the alphabet. What's that?
That still is over there?
I don't know.
That thing is still over there?
It's still over there.
Still feeding on itself?
Interesting to go look at from time to time just to see what they're all up about. And all they're talking about the last 2 days is Letitia James committed mortgage fraud. And oh my God, they're coming after her and they're doing this thing.
And she's really not a New York citizen.
All of that. Yeah.
Yeah, resident.
And the reason why they're coming after her is because she's dangerous to him. Almost uniquely dangerous to him, because as the Attorney General of the state of New York, she has jurisdiction over anything that happens on Wall Street, any financial crime, anything like that. And of course, Trump has lots of properties in New York. There's still this case where we're waiting for the appeal to be over.
Yes.
Where they're going to take like $400 million away from him.
Show us the money.
I want to see that. I want that. Why is that delayed? There's no reason for that to be delayed.
Why is it delayed?
So you've got that. And then you have Eric Adams, who is functionally we say the word puppet, Putin's puppet all the time. This guy he will do whatever Trump says. If Trump says jump in front of the subway, he will jump in front of the subway.
Yeah.
He has no more agency at all. And that's the mayor of New York City is, not an insignificant person in the state. The election isn't until 2026. So we have Hochul at least till November or whatever. After, I guess, in 27, she should be there for a while. Everyone's saying Elise Stefanik, Harvard graduate, Elise Stefanik.
Harvard graduate. What an embarrassment.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, listen, he pulled her to keep her in the seat in the House because she wasn't,
She was like 1 inch away from moving into her fancy apartment right next to the United Nations.
Right. Well, I'm in her district, Stephen, and I can tell you, there's a revolt here. This is a district that's been taken advantage of and taken for granted by the Republican Party for so long. They've basically been. Many of the people up here are just not engaged in politics, and so to them, that's the Republicans that were their like dads. I mean, you see the Trump propaganda on some houses scattered about, like you see everywhere across the nation, but. You talk to people and they're just, they're like, what? I mean, they're busy and they're hardworking. They're farmers. They're, but not lately, not when like the butcher is going, can you believe what they did now? Got to get rid of this guy. Like, that's, you can't go to the grocery store without the people working there talking to you about how horrible Trump is. So that's a big shift. Let me tell you.
Can I go back for just a second to sort of remind people that when Trump was elected in 2016, 9 out of 10 Manhattanites voted against him, voted for Hillary. Yeah. The people who, in essence, knew him best, roundly rejected him, and I'm quite sure that he's still quite aware of that statistic. And the guy who says, I am your retribution, if he could find a way to haul every New Yorker, every Manhattanite into jail, he would do that too.
If he bought into a co-op, the co-op board would be like, fuck off, buddy.
Yeah.
That's why he has to have his own building. Nobody would accept him because co-op boards can do that. They could be like, yeah, we don't want you. We don't even have to tell you why.
Yeah.
Get the fuck out. So yeah, that's a
So
good point, Stephen.
I think we should just all be aware of that. And I'm not interested in any elected official that doesn't can't show a track record if they're trying to get reelected. I don't even want them in there if they are not part of resisting this and using all the power at their own disposal in the positions that we've elected them to actually throw sand in the gears of this man. So, and his aims and the administration's aims, and I think I feel like New Yorkers are pretty vehement about that, pretty strong and vocal about all of that. We were Greg and I a couple weeks ago were at the big march down in the city. And there's going to be another one tomorrow. So
how many? Let's do a prediction. Can we? If the idea was that between Grand Central at 42nd Street down into the 20s on Fifth Avenue, you had over 100,000 people. And
easily 200. Yeah.
So are we expecting the same kind of numbers tomorrow? Do you think, or does this not have quite the same?
I don't know.
With the last one.
It's a nicer day. It was very well organized the first time, I have to say. I was very impressed with how it was organized.
And it was raining. It was cold and raining.
Yeah, it'll be a nicer day tomorrow. And New York City is a good place to do this stuff because it's easy to get there and it's easy to leave. It's easy for people to suddenly show up en masse in a specific place, unlike in Washington, D.C., where you have to, and no one knows where they're going and everything shuts down and there's nowhere to park and blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
And then you get there and you're like a million miles away from anything, Here I am in front of the Washington Monument. Great.
Well, are you going to go in for it, Stephen? What do you think?
I am. Yeah. And
okay, great.
And it strikes me that, sort of like Harvard, which is okay. It's an elephant, it's a monolith, it's, all of these things. And we can have a lot of complicated feelings about it. And obviously across America, people have lots of complicated feelings about surely New York City, but it needs to come out in mass as a demonstration that the people who know him best cannot stand him. And I think that's, it's part of the creation of the mindset and, not just about tomorrow, but I think the coming weeks and the coming months where as the transgressions continue, right, as the violation of their oaths of office continue, that there are examples where finally people say, like, I've had enough. And, I think it might be because of the dismantling of Social Security, if payments don't start to come.
That's what it felt like a couple of weeks ago. That was like the thing. And now I think that and there were many, many signs for release him, right? And because that had just begun.
And so I think the other one is that if there starts to be the kidnapping of American citizens and taken to that gulag, that's also going to be one of those things where Americans say that they've had enough, and goodness knows it ought to.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen.
Those are good words to go out on. So
I want to ask one quick. Are you going to broadcast tomorrow?
I hadn't planned. I mean, that's a good thought.
Yeah, I highly recommend it, and we'll I don't know if we could even help put it on. We can put it on this channel. I don't know. I talked to Greg because Greg did it last time for us when we were there, and I thought that was great, Greg. I mean, it was nice to even if you don't end up broadcasting live, getting some recordings that you could then post so people can see it. Because even we did not see the kind of news coverage.
Media doesn't cover it. They don't.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. I happened to be in Chicago on April 5th, so I sort of covered what was happening there. And, I mean, it was photographs and all that, but there is something about moving pictures.
Yeah, there is something about moving pictures.
It does capture it. Capture it. So your Substack is called America. Is it America.substack? Is that what it is? I can't remember.
Well, America.substack.com. You can also go America.news. I mean, either of those get you there. It would be super if people are not following it now who would have a look. I'm right at the point of hitting I mean, literally like within 100 of hitting 100,000 subscribers.
Oh my God, everybody subscribe. Yeah, let's get you
it's
to
really good.
100,000.
It's an excellent Substack, and you do those
It's
great videos
amazing.
also, which are fantastic. And so I
Thank you
encourage
kindly.
everybody to do that. Okay, we've kept
Always
you 2
fun
minutes.
to be with you both. Thank you. I
Oh,
always
Kept you
learn
2
things.
minutes longer
Thank you.
than we promised. So
2 minutes longer
I
than we
hope you don't
promised.
hold
But
us against it.
we're gonna see you soon. We're coming back to the city, and so we'll all be together soon. I promise.
That would be a pleasure.
Yeah.
Excellent. Have a great weekend. Thanks, Stephen.
Thank you. You too.
Steven.